In the meantime now, it's time to speak to the Conservatives this morning. I'm joined now by Shadow Policing Minister Matt Vickers. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning. I want to ask you first of all about Sir Keir Starmer's announcement yesterday of a deal to transfer sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. Your party's been very critical of that deal, but do you accept that Britain had to hand back these islands given the international legal challenges over the UK's sovereignty?
Not at all. It's a hypothetical situation based on legal advice. It's not been put to the test. We haven't challenged it. It hasn't been through any sort of legal process. This is not necessarily the case. And you know what? It's one thing to hand it over. It's another to pay £101 million every year for the pleasure. It's a ridiculous outcome for the UK. It's not in Britain's interests at all. The British Indian Ocean territories should remain just that, British.
OK, so if it wasn't necessary, why did your government, when the Conservatives were in power, begin the discussions? In fact, as I understand it, 85% of the negotiations happened under the Tory government.
That's not the case. The reality is that we have dialogues with countries all the time about very different issues and about what their interests might be and what they may or may not want us to do. It doesn't mean you have to go and sign over British sovereign territory to another party. It doesn't mean that you have to accept a deal in which you're paying that huge amount of money, £101 million a year. That is huge. That may well, we've seen what the government are doing in terms of tax and the impact it's having on our economy. We've seen them taking away winter fuel allowance from pensioners. That is a huge sum of money that could make a real difference to British taxpayers, and we're handing it away.
But I want to come back to these international legal challenges, because the government would say that that they could have jeopardised not only the legal standing of the base, but they could also have potentially undermined Britain's roles in other global institutions if we were seen to ignore international rulings.
It's not a ruling, it's not a judgment, it's a hypothetical situation that some lefty lawyers have come up with. It has not been put to the test. We haven't challenged it. We haven't fought it through legal processes. It is not the situation. It's an agenda that, Jeremy Corbyn and the likes buy into and are very happy to hand over territory. But when you look at all of the we talked about international relationships and partnerships, the reality is that Starmer and this Labour government are making a right hash. When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. We've seen what's gone on with the EU, where we're now taking more EU law. We're going to take more judgments from the European Court of Justice, and we're going to pay a hell of a lot in British taxpayers' money for that privilege, as well as, completely undermining our fishing industry in this country. It is a disaster. We've seen what's gone on with the Indian trade deal. It's apparently a deal where British taxpayers are now paying a fortune. Anybody who employs anybody in the UK is paying more by way of Labour's jobs tax, at the same time as a lot of that money will be given a free ride to Indian workers who come to this country to work. It's a disaster. He seems to find himself at the wrong end of the negotiating table and is certainly not doing anything for British interests abroad.
The Prime Minister says your opposition to the Chagos deal puts you on the side of Russia, Iran and China rather than the UK's allies. He says you're playing politics with national security and that your response is helping our enemies.
The UK under the Conservatives could not have been a stronger partner to Ukraine. But actually, let's look at Mauritius. You look at what they're saying about, Russia are proudly announcing that it's increasing its cooperation with Mauritius. China is saying that they're going to have they're going to deepen strategic relationships with Mauritius. This is certainly not the case. This is the most bizarre characterisation I've ever heard, and it's talk from a very desperate man in Keir Starmer, who knows he's made an absolute hash of this situation.
You mentioned the cost before. As far as the cost is concerned, the government argues that the £100 million annual payment that you mentioned, which is the cost of the lease, is a necessary investment to secure the base's future. Keir Starmer says it's value for money. He says that cost is the same or slightly less than the running cost of an aircraft carrier minus the aircraft.
The people in this country, you talk to the farmers who are going to be battered by inheritance tax, you talk to the pensioners who missed out on winter fuel this year, they're the £101 million every year for the next 99 years is a hell of a lot of money. But I mean, the bizarre thing is, this isn't to lease something that we don't do. It is British sovereign territory and we are paying in order to operate a lease on it. This is utterly balmy.
I want to ask you just a couple of questions on the government's sentencing review carried out, of course, by David Gork, the former Conservative Justice Minister. The Ministry of Justice has said that they're planning to expand a pilot of voluntary chemical castration for the most serious sex offenders to 20 regions. They're looking at mandatory chemical castration. What do you make of it?
Well, do you know what I would do? I'm definitely up for looking at this. I think it's something we should be looking at. It's the extension of an existing voluntary programme. It should be looked at, but it's a bit of a smokescreen. They announced that yesterday at the same time as announcing that they're getting rid of short sentences. Those, shoplifters, those burglars, those people, violent offenders are going to be let out of prison earlier. They're going to reduce people's sentence. People only spend a third of the time to which they're sentenced behind bars. But it comes on the back of 16,000 criminals being let out of prison early through the government's early release scheme. Some who have gone on to reoffend, but more importantly, they told us they were tagging some of these people. They failed to tag them. And worse than that, they allowed some of the wrong people out of prison onto the streets of the UK, people who had no entitlement to be, even under their own early release scheme, had no entitlement to be released, letting the wrong people out and failing to tag them. Utter incompetence.
Did they have any choice in putting in measures like this when the Conservatives left prisons stuffed to bursting?
The reason there is pressure on our whole prison population is because we made two big decisions. The last government made two big decisions. One was not to release people during the pandemic. The other was to toughen up sentences. We started putting people away for longer for some of the most heinous, awful, vile crimes. That was the right thing to do. It put pressure on our prison population. That's true. But actually, the last government initiated the largest prison building programme since the Victorian era. There were 6 prisons being built. 2 had already opened the doors, another one's opened the doors this year. There are others that are in train, but actually the solution to this problem is to deport foreign national offenders. 12% of our prison population are foreign national offenders who should be deported from this country. Last week in the House of Commons, there was an opportunity to vote to remove those criminals and deport them, or send them back to wherever they may have came from. The government voted against that. And then we had the ability to disapply the Human Rights Act so that these things couldn't get caught up in the court system. That's the right thing to do. Send people home, create the space that we need in our prison service. Do not let violent offenders back out onto Britain's streets. It undermines public trust in our justice system and it makes Britain a much less safe place.
Finally, I just want to get your reaction to the fallout from the shootings in Washington. Benjamin Netanyahu has blamed Sir Keir Starmer, as well as Emmanuel Macron and Mark Carney of Canada, for fueling anti-Semitism after the shooting of these 2 Israeli embassy workers in Washington, D.C. Benjamin Netanyahu says they're on the wrong side of history for threatening concrete action against Israel if it continues its military operations in Gaza. What's your response to what the Israeli Prime Minister is saying?
Well, I think what we've seen with the loss of 2 lives is absolutely devastating situation, devastating story, and shows how this situation with Gaza and Israel it has real consequences across the world. It's on us as politicians, it's on world leaders to actually be very sensible and cautious and careful in the language that they use, because it does have real consequences. But it's a very charged and very heated debate, and I think we have to have level heads and we have to find a way forwards with this situation that removes Hamas from Gaza and the consequences that's having a terrorist organisation running Gaza. We've got to have a look at how we get the 58 hostages back that are still being held there, and we've also got to have a look at some of the humanitarian crises that is going on in Gaza and some of those innocent people who are feeling going through the most horrendous of circumstances and situations. It cannot carry on like this, and we've got to find a way forwards.
OK, well, Matt Vickers, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.